Today we're gonna break down the sound that has, let's be real, defined a generation. We're talking about Metro Boomin. Yeah, but not just the hits. We're going way deeper into the actual philosophy behind his sound, a framework built on a really radical idea that true power, the kind of impact that really lasts, doesn't come from adding more stuff. It comes from stripping everything away until only the absolute essential remains. This is the story of the Metro principle.
This one idea right here, it's the key to everything. See, back in 2016, Metro Boomin was just 22 years old, and he was already at the very center of global pop culture. And he got there by doing the exact opposite of what everyone else was doing. You had an industry just screaming for attention, more layers, more instruments, more complexity. But he found his power in the silence between the notes. He literally weaponized minimalism because he understood that the loudest thing in the room isn't always the one with real power. Real authority comes from making someone feel something with the fewest possible elements.
So here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with the insane grind that shaped his whole mindset in the 16-hour commute. Then we'll get to that light bulb moment that changed everything in the Gospel of Empty Space. After that, we'll break down his actual system in the architecture of the vibe, see the incredible payoff in the producer as the artist, and finally, figure out how you can use this whole philosophy yourself with Your Simplicity is the Code.
Okay, so to really get the principle, you first have to understand the pressure that created it. Before all the platinum records and the fame, there was just a kid, a car, and a distance that seemed impossible. This is not one of those instant success stories. This was a story of a relentless, almost soul-crushing logistical grind.
Leland Wayne, the guy who would become Metro Boomin, was an outsider just based on where he lived. Growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, he was a world away from Atlanta, which was and still is the capital of the sound he was obsessed with. He was stuck in this geographical gap. While other kids were worried about high school stuff, he was down in his basement, totally lost in the logic of Fruity Loops, engineering these 808s that he was convinced could change the world. And at night, he wasn't doing homework. He was on Twitter, cold calling the giants of the rap game, just begging for one chance, a single list.
But here's the thing. That gap wasn't closed by a lucky break. It was closed by pure brute force willpower. And that will was measured in time and distance, a 16-hour round trip. Every single weekend, his mom, who was his biggest believer, would drive him from St. Louis to Atlanta and then all the way back. Now this number, 16 hours, it's not just a statistic. It's an insane level of commitment. It's the physical proof of his hunger.
I mean, really picture this. It's Friday, right after school. You hop in the car for an 8-hour drive to Atlanta. You spend all day Saturday hustling, networking, trying to get into any studio you can, playing beats for anyone who will listen. Then, on Sunday, you get right back in the car for another 8 hours, just so you can get home in time for school on Monday morning. He was literally sleeping in the backseat of a car while his friends were at prom. He was trading a normal teenage life for a tiny chance to be in the room where it happened.
And with that whole ordeal built inside of him was something profound. This wasn't just about being dedicated, it was about forging a whole new mindset. This grind built what you can only call logistical consistency. Faced with this massive distance bottleneck, he didn't break. He built an internal fortress. He systematically taught himself to unlearn the desire for comfort. He learned that if you want to create a sound that's truly essential, your dedication has to be just as essential, just as non-negotiable. That car became his office, and those 16 hours became the fire where his entire philosophy was forged. And it's right from the friction of that journey that a powerful new idea started to emerge. After years of fighting through all the noise, the travel, the striving, all of it, he had an epiphany. And it wasn't about adding more, it was about taking things away. He discovered the Gospel of Empty Space. This became his new golden rule. It's a simple, powerful idea that completely went against what everyone else was doing. You see, most producers back then saw themselves as decorators, you know? They just add more and more layers and complexity to show off how skilled they were. But Metro realized that was all just noise. He understood that the heartbeat of a track, the one thing that makes you physically react, is the low end, the bass. If that wasn't perfect, nothing else mattered. A track wasn't just a bunch of sounds, it was a living, breathing thing, and the bass line was its breath.
And this brings us right to the official definition, the Metro principle. It's a whole belief system, really. It says that true authority in a sound doesn't come from complexity, it comes from distillation. It's the art of removing every single non-essential element until the only thing left is that pure, undeniable vibe. He realized that the low end, that deep, resonant frequency, that's the only truth that really matters in a track. Everything else is just a conversation happening around that truth.
This slide just lays it out perfectly. The two mindsets. On one side, you have the old way. More is more, which just leads to clutter, decoration, and noise. But on the other side, you've got the Metro principle. Less is truth. This is all about distillation, vibe, and bounce. He embraced this philosophy of sonic transparency, the idea that your job is to make the path to the core emotion as clear as humanly possible. He wasn't making noise, he was engineering a feeling through minimalist saturation, using the fewest elements possible but making sure every single one hit with maximum impact.
Now, a philosophy is one thing, but making it a reality, track after track, year after year, that takes a system. So let's actually break down that system, the specific, repeatable habits Metro developed to turn his principle into the sound that would define an entire era. This is the architecture of the vibe.
He basically approached his creative process like it was a high-performance lab. He developed this routine he called systematic sonic reduction, which was all about making sure every single note was a threat to the silence. This wasn't random, it was a super disciplined process. It all starts with calibrating the core element, the 808. Then he does a vibe audit to strip away anything that's not essential. From there, he builds the foundational world for the project and then curates its whole emotional journey.
So his system starts with his most famous technique, 808 calibration. Metro is famous for refusing to use stock drum sounds straight out of the box. And why is that? Because the stock sound is generic. Instead, he meticulously tunes every single kick, every snare, every hi-hat to the specific musical key of the song. Now, this isn't just some nerdy audio engineering trick, it's a psychological one. When the bass and the drums are in perfect harmony with the melody, it creates this resonance that you don't just hear, you feel it in your chest. He's literally forcing a physical reaction.
Okay, the second pillar of his system is what we're calling the executive model. And this is a huge shift in identity. Metro refused to be just a beat supplier, someone who just sends a folder of instrumentals and hopes one gets picked. No. Instead, he adopted the mindset of an executive producer, a curator. He focused on album world building, making sure every song he touched served a single unified aesthetic and added to the project's entire emotional journey. He wasn't just looking for placements, he was looking for impact.
So what was the result of all of this? The grueling travel, the radical philosophy, the disciplined system? Well, it was a complete and total transformation. Not just for him, but for the entire role of the music producer in pop culture. This is the ultimate payoff of his principle.
I mean, this arc is just staggering. The journey took him from being a teenager sleeping in the backseat of a car, desperately trying to get his beats heard, to becoming the go-to architect for the sound of a new cinematic era, crafting entire soundscapes for blockbuster films like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. He didn't just get a seat at the table, he redesigned the whole table.
You can really break down his legacy into 4 key pillars. First, he proved that simplicity isn't a weakness, it's a structural weapon. He could take a simple 3-note melody and make it the most recognizable sound on the planet. Second, and this is huge, he completely destroyed the old myth of the producer as this hidden, behind-the-scenes person. He replaced it with a brand new model, a world where the architect, the person who builds the sonic world, is just as much of a star as the person who lives inside.
Ultimately, this is the core of his impact. He showed that a singular, focused vision, when it's executed with discipline and consistency, can literally redefine the sound of an entire culture. His work is proof that you don't need to be the loudest person in the room to have the most influence. You just need to have the clearest idea. And that right there is where his story becomes a blueprint for all of us.
So, how does this apply to you? Because Metro's journey isn't just about making music. It's a powerful guide for anyone out there who feels like they're being drowned out by the noise in their life, their career, their creative process. The principles that made him a legend can be applied absolutely anywhere.
Here it is. Your power is directly tied to your ability to stop adding things just to look busy or complex, and to start distilling, to start stripping things away until only the most essential, most impactful element is left. You need to find your own 808. What's the one thing in your work that, when it's right, makes everything else just fall into place? What is that core truth that creates a real, physical, emotional reaction? That's your 808. So think about it. What project do you have going on right now? At work, in your personal life, some creative thing you're working on? Where have you been overcomplicating it? Adding layers and features to look smart, or maybe to avoid making a clear decision? What would happen if you applied the Metro principle? If you just stripped it all down to the one thing that actually moves people, the one thing that delivers the core vibe?
When you learn to embrace simplicity, you stop being a victim of the noise all around you and you become the master of the bounce. You start creating clarity,
instead of just contributing to all the clutter. The lesson from Metro Boomin's journey is that the truth isn't in the noise, it's in the empty space you create to let it breathe. Your simplicity isn't a limitation, it is the very code for your greatness.